Good morning. Today we had additional scheduled depositions with the top lawyer for the National Security Council, as well as Mr. Blair from the Office of Management and Budget, and someone who worked closely with Mick Mulvaney. Both of them defied congressional subpoenas and refused to appear for their scheduled depositions, as has been the case with other witnesses who have done the same thing. This will be further evidence of an effort by the administration to obstruct the lawful and constitutional duties of Congress. I would also say, and we expect the witnesses who have been subpoenaed to come in this afternoon at White House instruction also to be no-shows. This will only further add to the body of evidence on a potential obstruction of Congress charge against the President. Indeed, in the Nixon impeachment, there was an article of impeachment based on the obstruction of Congress that itemized each of the subpoenas that the White House had defied. Well, today we have 4 additional subpoenas to add to the list of a potential charge involving the President of the United States and his obstruction of our constitutional duties. These witnesses are significant, and the White House understands they're significant. Based on the testimony the committees have already received, we know that these witnesses, those that were in the law office of the National Security Council, those who worked for Mulvaney either in the Chief of Staff's office or the Office of Management and Budget, are first-hand witnesses to allegations of serious misconduct, both vis-a-vis the suspension of military aid and the effort to use that aid as a lever to get Ukraine to do these political investigations to help the President's re-election campaign, but also in efforts to potentially hide the evidence of the President's misconduct by placing that call record in a classified system that would be beyond most individuals' access, and a system in which that call record did not belong. So very pertinent testimony, very relevant to the other witnesses who have come forward, and we may infer by the White House obstruction here that their testimony would be further incriminating of the President. I will say this, it's quite obvious, and we fully expected this. We have seen a series of shifting, ever-changing rationales for this campaign of obstruction. First, there was the argument, we won't comply, don't have to comply until there's a formal vote on the House floor. Well, we had a formal vote on the House floor. Then it was, we don't have to make these witnesses available because they're senior officials and they're given absolute immunity, even though no court has ever upheld the claims of absolute immunity. Indeed, the only one to reach a decision on it involving Harriet Miers ruled there is no such thing as absolute immunity. And it has been the uniform position of Democrats and Republicans that we do not respect any fallacious claims of absolute immunity. But then when people who were subpoenaed had little or no interaction with the President, and there couldn't be even a colorable claim of some kind of immunity, the explanation shifted once again to, well, we're not going to let them come forward because you won't let agency lawyers present. And again, that would violate the House deposition rules. It would also violate the practice used by both Democrats and Republicans for depositions in the past when there are concerns that agency lawyers are representing agencies that may have been engaged in wrongdoing or may use facts gained in the investigation to prejudice other witnesses in the investigation. This was the practice for the current members of our investigative committees, people like Jim Jordan during Benghazi, and people like Mike Pompeo, and people like Mick Mulvaney, all participated in depositions of senior agency officials without the presence of agency counsel. So if they join the President's objection here, they do so in fashion that is directly contradictory to their practices when they were in the majority. Today we also are beginning the process of releasing transcripts of our depositions. This morning released the depositions of Ambassador McKinley, Ambassador Yovanovitch, and I will leave you all to review those transcripts. There are a few things that will become immediately clear when you do, and the first is that contrary to the claims of the President and his acolytes on the Hill, that these have been proceedings in which the Republicans have not been able to be present or ask questions. In fact, Republicans were present for all of these depositions, and in fact, they had equal opportunity with Democrats to ask questions, and you will see they took full advantage of those opportunities to ask questions. You will see in Ambassador Yovanovitch's testimony what a dedicated public servant she is. This is someone who served the country with distinction for decades. It is someone who also is one of the first witnesses to this irregular back channel that the president established with Rudy Giuliani and the damage that it was doing to America's national security and foreign policy interests. How it was working in opposition, not in support of U.S. policy objectives. Ambassador Yovanovitch had a well-earned reputation as a fighter of corruption. And she was working with Ukraine to get Ukraine to fight corruption. And so what does this irregular back channel sanctioned by the president do? It seeks to remove someone fighting corruption in Ukraine by employing a vicious smear campaign in which the State Department at the highest levels acknowledged had no merit whatsoever. That smear campaign, orchestrated by this irregular channel, was successful in removing a U.S. ambassador and tarring her reputation. Of course, you see the president's comments about the ambassador in the call record. We also released the testimony today of Ambassador McKinley, another career diplomat and public servant, someone who was asked by the Secretary of State to come back and assist the State Department at a very difficult time for the department. And what is so striking about his testimony is the degree to which he sought to get the State Department to issue a support for its own ambassador, and how those repeated efforts were rebuffed. But you also see, in reading his transcript, his growing alarm at the degree to which the apparatus of the State Department itself was being used to seek political information for a political purpose by the President of the United States and others. And you see that these are two of the principal reasons that caused this career public servant to decide that he must resign his office, as he did. We will be releasing further transcripts. Tomorrow we are scheduled to release the transcripts of Ambassador Volker and Ambassador Sondland. And we will continue to release the transcripts in an orderly way. We continue to allow witnesses the opportunity to review their transcripts. We continue to make redactions for private information or personally identifiable information, but we will continue to release the transcripts. And we will soon, although I can't give you the timetable, be moving to open hearings as well. And I'm happy to respond to a couple of questions.
One of the witnesses who was supposed to come, Charles Kupperman, filed a lawsuit to essentially force a ruling about whether he should testify. That's going to be delayed till December. It's possible John Bolton also may follow a similar course. Will you delay your proceedings to ensure you get their testimony, or are you ready to move forward without hearing from these key witnesses?
We're not going to delay our work. That would merely allow these witnesses and the White House to succeed with their goal, which is to delay, deny, obstruct. The lawsuit that Dr. Kupperman filed, I think, is on its face without merit. Someone who gets a congressional subpoena to avoid the subpoena doesn't simply get to sue in court to try to avoid the subpoena. I think it will undoubtedly be the case that lawsuit will be dismissed for lack of standing or justiciability. But the whole point of it is to delay. And I would say this to those who would use litigation like the White House or others for purposes of delay to avoid their duty, which is to follow the law and follow a congressional subpoena. They should follow the example of the courageous people that have come forward. People who worked for Dr. Kupperman, people who worked for John Bolton, people who have in their careers much more at risk, have shown the courage to come forward. They have not hidden behind litigation. They have not hidden behind the White House, as the witnesses today have. They've shown enormous courage and patriotism, and I would urge others to follow their example, not follow the corrupt example out of the White House, which is seeking to obstruct this investigation.
Yes. Some of these individuals say they'd be willing to come if they were allowed to bring agency lawyers. Why not let them do that?
Well, it has been the consistent House rule that we do not permit agency counsel in the room, particularly when we have concerns about those agencies. The State Department, for example, and this you'll also see in the transcripts. I'm trying to think if it's in the transcripts. Yes, it's in the McKinley transcript. State Department representatives made the claim to their employees that they were being bullied by the Congress. And in fact, the State Department employees were concerned about being bullied by their own State Department, and that bullying was being misrepresented to Congress. These are the same agency personnel that these witnesses want to bring in and sit in on these depositions. But this isn't just a decision that the chairs are making in this investigation. It's the decision that Trey Gowdy made as chair. It's the decision that Jim Jordan made in his participation in the Benghazi investigations. It's the decision Mick Mulvaney made when he was conducting investigations. This has been the uniform policy and practice of the House.
And then when it comes to Yovanovitch and McKinley, do you anticipate bringing these individuals back for public hearings?
At this point, I'm not going to comment on who our witnesses will be in the open hearings, but we will endeavor to make the decision about who the most important witnesses are and try to provide testimony in an orderly way in which the American people can understand the nature of the allegations and the facts involving, what is at the heart of this investigation, and that is the President's abuse of his office to coerce an ally that is fighting off Russians in our national security interests. They are fighting off the Russians in their interest as well. To withhold vital military support from that nation, to withhold a vital meeting from the president of that nation as leverage to get that nation to engage in the corrupt act of these investigations the president believed would help his reelection campaign. We're also obviously looking at allegations that there may have been effort to cover up these activities. And so the witnesses that bear most directly on those issues are the witnesses we'll want to bring in.
Last question. Attorney John Eisenberg, we're talking now about the transcript of President Trump's July 25 phone call with the President of Ukraine. Is it your understanding that John Eisenberg at the National Security Council moved that transcript over to the super secret intelligence server on his own, or did he do it in coordination with John Bolton, the National Security Advisor?
Well, I think you'll see as we release more transcripts that there may have been others involved in those discussions. But one of the reasons we wanted Mr. Eisenberg to come in is to find out what his role was, what the role of others was, and why a transcript that plainly did not belong in a classified system that is meant for some of the most secret of intelligence activities, that is, covert action activities. Why would a call record that the president would have the country believe was perfect, why would it be hidden in this classified system? So clearly the White House does not want him to testify. They do not want the American people to know why Mr. Eisenberg or others made that decision. And I think we can infer that the reason they don't want the public to hear from Mr. Eisenberg is that it would tend to corroborate allegations against the president. But that's the very reason we want to bring him in. And of course, we are concerned that he, as a top lawyer in the administration, would engage in the lawless act of refusing to abide by lawful process. Thank you.
Is releasing these depositions mean you don't expect any of the rest of these witnesses to appear?